Hello and welcome back. It is now a steamy August 26th. I think we are in for some pretty hot and warm weather this week, so should be good conditions for harvesting as long as we can get the grain into the bin at a somewhat moderate temperature. So we will remain to see if that happens or not, but let's see what's going on this week. Lots of canola fields like this one. Last week we're at swath timing, but now they are a little too far. You can see we do still have some green. There's a little patch over there that's still got a few little green side branches, but for the most part, most of the field is at 100% total color change now, and this would be a good time to do something like heat and glyphosate or Reglone. But really this year, because we're not ripening prematurely due to so much drought stress, the crop is turning pretty evenly for the most part, and I don't think we're going to need to do a whole lot of desiccation on a lot of these canola acres. Silage corn crop this week is looking really good, starting to fill out pretty good. This particular ear is back beyond blister stage now, so we are in milk stage, filling out pretty good here. We got excellent fill, we've got great potential, just need to give it longer and more water, let her develop. Well, here we are back to that relatively late seeded hemp field. Looks for the most part like the male flowers are pretty much done, I think, at this point. There's still a few, well, no, that one might just be opening now. So I think they are still setting or making some pollen, but it looks like the females for the most part are all pretty much done. You can see there's a huge amount of potential seed on here. Each one of these balls basically has a developing seed inside of it. So there's quite a bit in these plants. You can see it ends up yielding probably fairly well by the time all is said and done in here. Well, with everything turning and ripening so quickly, there is a very real danger of everything getting too ripe too fast and being too much stuff being ready to harvest. That is definitely the case with a lot of the barley out there. Take this field, for example. This field, probably moisture level would have been ready to go the last few days, but you can really see those heads are really hanging down. So any sort of weather event at this point, any standing barley like this that is this ripe, you can really start to lose those heads on the ground. You can actually already see there is a few heads on the ground here and there. Now, some of this could have been from grasshopper feeding at the last minute. Quite often that little bit of stem, that peduncle underneath the head, is the last remaining bit of green on some of these plants. The grasshoppers can just shear them right off and dump your heads on the ground. Well, some of the wheat fields are ripening up fast, depending on variety. Most of the spring wheats are getting very close to harvestable now. So this field, there is still a few patches of green here and there in the field, but the vast majority of it is ripe and drying down, just waiting for the cooperator to basically take off what's left around my plots here. And then probably next week, we'll be taking my plots off with Farming Smarter's small plot combine. Well, now that there's lots of crop coming off, it's time to start talking about post-harvest weed control. So this pea field was desiccated with Reglone Ion, which did a great job, but now we have lots of weed regrowth. So you can see here we got a whole bunch of volunteer peas. Those are pretty easy to control. We got a bunch of volunteer barley over here. There was barley in this field last year, so that's where that's coming from. Patches of kochia over there, which is now regrowing, so they're about 4 or 5 inches tall. And here we have a patch of Canada thistle. So if we could come in here with a product like DB878 Pro or Intruvix, whether we're coming into a winter cereal or going into a spring cereal, that would be a pretty good product. Get a little bit of that dicamba and glyphosate on some of these thistles. We can probably knock these patches down a bit. It's pretty hard to get 100% control on a patch of thistles, but if we can knock it down 70-80%, that would be extremely good at thinning that crop or that patch of thistles out, and then hopefully over multiple seasons we can completely eliminate it. Well, there is some slower, greener fields of canola still out there. This field of Cantera, I believe this is the 2600 variety, are being a little slow. So this one, we do have some Sclerotinia as well as a little bit of verticillium in here, which is making it look a little bit more mature than it is. But really, we're probably averaging about 40 to 50% color change. So we're not quite at swath timing yet, but we are getting pretty close. I bet you by weekend into early next week, this will be at perfect timing to swath. Well, here we have another very nice looking cornfield. This one is pretty tall. We are mostly hitting milk stage in this one as well. Potential here is looking pretty good. Looks like we've had very good pollination everything filling out pretty well. So we'll know more in the next couple weeks. Not seeing a whole pile of aphids yet in the crop, but there are some plants do seem to have more than others. You can see we got a bunch of aphids just underneath this leaf here. There was a ladybug just going by over here somewhere I saw a minute ago. So there is some beneficials in place, and hopefully they will keep the aphid population under control. Never had to spray a cornfield for aphids yet, but they do sometimes become an issue later on in the season. You'll see a lot of them on the husk up here. This field of oats is hitting boot stage and everything in here is looking pretty good, although it does seem like we are starting to see a little bit of barley yellow dwarf virus appearing in a few little spots. So this spot here, about 3 feet around, this is about what I'm seeing throughout the field. You can see we are a little bit shorter, a little bit stunted in that area. That is usually the first symptom that we will see in actively growing plants with this disease. You can also see those leaves are starting to turn yellow to a burnt orange color. Aphid population in this field, definitely high. Now these plants at this growth stage will probably still put out a head, but they may not yield as much as unaffected plants. Last year the infection came in much earlier, which suppressed and stunted the crop even more and really severely affected yield to the point where a lot of fields weren't even harvestable. But these plants here should be perfectly fine. Most of my earlier seeded fields of oats are all heading and in milk stage now, looking pretty good. Pretty much almost no sign of barley yellow dwarf virus in here at all. Just a few plants here and there. And at this late stage, it's not going to cause any further stunting or anything really. Heads are already emerged, so it's not going to really hurt yield. Well, a lot of the irrigated wheat this week is ready to harvest as well. Everything is basically turning ripe all at the same time, so we just don't have enough equipment to go around, but lots of this wheat should be coming off in the next week. There is a little bit of ergot that I'm finding in some wheat fields this year, so keep an eye out for this. Make sure you get your harvest samples checked. You don't want to get a nasty surprise at the elevator and not meet grade because of this. It is a relatively simple matter to color sort it out, but it's not cheap either. Checking out some DeKalb plots today out by Coaldale. Here is the 401 plot, looking pretty good. If you don't know much about this variety, it is a stacked trait variety. This is one of my favorites. Looks really good in the field, stands nice and tall, good pod shatter, and you can spray both glyphosate and Liberty in there. And unlike in Vigor, it actually dries down and stays dried down at harvest time. Well, our AgroPlus canola variety trials are looking pretty good. These were desiccated about a week ago now, so they are ready to go. They are slated to be coming off the field here tomorrow, so it'll be really interesting to see what the results from this are. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, we'll have some interesting numbers. Definitely seeing a lot of variability in the chickpeas this season. A lot of that moisture in July, August has really kept some of these areas quite green and lush with multiple stages of pods in development, some of which are still very green. Other areas of the field are rapidly ripening up and are not far from harvest, so it's going to be an interesting one for some of these fields. Lentils are starting to come off and are looking pretty good. I don't have any yield numbers on this one here yet, but this is green lentils, and you can see we got excellent pod set. There's piles and piles of pods in here. I think it'll be the best lentil crop this farm has had for a couple of years, but similar to some of the chickpeas, you can see there is multiple stages. There is some greener plants in there. Even though we did desiccate this, some of it just is not ready to go quite yet. So lots of these fields are kind of coming off a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Here at the top of this canola plant, there is a grasshopper who is dead in here. So this is a victim of the fungus grilli. So this moves into the grasshopper population usually every year to some degree or another. Basically, it infects their brain, forces them to climb up to the top of the nearest, tallest thing around them. And then they hang on and they die. And then they basically, the fungus basically spreads from that body, hopefully infecting more grasshoppers. So always fun to see. Now that all the canola is ripening and maturing, it's causing a lot of the insects that were in there to migrate out. So we're seeing a lot of things like ligus and cabbage seed pod weevil and flea beetles moving through the fields. So in this field, for example, we got this truck path on a road allowance here where, the constant truck traffic has kept this canola relatively green and unmatured and damaged. So you can see all of the flea beetles in here dining away. So as they get moved out of the rest of the field. So if you have any, fall brassicas or anything like that planted beside a canola field, this is the time of the year you're going to have flea beetle problems. As those flea beetles move out, they are going to be hitting those fall brassicas pretty hard. Well, that'll be it for this week. It is a little cloudy out there today, but should be clearing off this weekend, and harvest conditions should remain good for the next week or so, according to my forecast anyways. So hopefully that holds true, and we will see you next week.